He pretended to be poor to get a loyal wife. But what happened surprised everyone. Julian Vance never imagined life could crumble as fast as it was built. In a matter of months, everything that seemed solid proved to be as fragile as glass. The people who swore eternal love vanished at the first sign of trouble, and those who promised loyalty showed their true faces when the dollars started to run out. Now, with just an old backpack on his shoulders and some worn-out clothes he had bought at a thrift store in the big city, he arrived at a small town in the countryside. The faded yellow t-shirt clung to his sweaty body after hours of walking down the dirt road. His hair, beginning to grey at the temples, was disheveled and covered in dust. He stopped in front of the first property he found, where he saw a middle-aged woman carrying a heavy bucket of water from the well to the house. He took a deep breath before approaching the wooden gate. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out, his voice hoarse with fatigue. The woman turned, startled. Her dark brown hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her simple cotton dress was stained with dirt. She had the appearance of someone who worked hard, with calloused hands and a face marked by the sun. Her brown eyes watched him with suspicion as she set the bucket down. "Good afternoon," she replied, keeping her distance. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for work," said Julian, removing the worn cap he was wearing. "Anything will do. I know how to work the land, fix fences, tend to animals. You don't have to pay much, just enough for food and a place to sleep." The woman looked him up and down. There was something about this man that didn't quite fit the story he was telling. The way he spoke, despite the fatigue, had a touch of refinement that didn't match his disheveled appearance. But at the same time, she saw genuine desperation in his eyes. "I don't usually hire strangers," she replied, crossing her arms. "This town is small, everyone knows each other here. Where are you from, sir?" "From New York City," lied Julian, or rather, told a half-truth. "I had a small business that didn't work out. Lost everything. The woman I was going to marry left me when the money ran out. I need to start over somewhere, and I thought in the countryside it would be easier to find good-hearted people." The woman sighed. There was a painful sincerity in those words that touched something inside her. She herself knew the feeling of loss and abandonment well. "My name is Lydia Whitman," she said finally. "I was widowed 2 years ago. My husband passed away suddenly, left me alone with this property and a pile of debts. I don't have much, but there's no shortage of work. If you're willing to work hard, I can offer a room in the back and 3 meals a day. The pay will be modest." "I accept," Julian replied too quickly before thinking better of it. He took a deep breath and continued more calmly. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Lydia. My name is Julian. Julian Miller." Another false name. One more layer in the farce he was building. But it was necessary. No one could discover who he really was, or all would be lost. The story continues with all the events narrated previously. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuation of the entire story, already narrated, up to the point where we stopped. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. The rest of the story narrated up to the point about the collective, about help. Together they told of the public confession, the decision to give a second chance, the years of hard work to rebuild trust. About the Harvest Collective, about helping people, about how each challenge made them stronger. Grace listened to everything in silence, only asking occasional questions to clarify details. When they finished, it was late at night, and the stars shone brightly above them. "Thank you for being honest," Grace finally said, "for not hiding the hard parts or trying to make everything seem perfect." "Life isn't perfect," said Julian, "and we are definitely not perfect, but what we have is real." "And that's exactly what makes the story so powerful," said Grace, "because it shows that real people with real flaws can build something truly beautiful if they're willing to work for it." She stood up and hugged both her parents. "You've given me the best gift parents can give a daughter," she said. "Not dollars, not opportunities, though I've had those too. But values. A living example of how to live with integrity, even when it's hard." That night, when Julian finally went to sleep, he felt a deep peace. His journey had begun with lies and manipulation, but it would end with truth and love. It wasn't the ending he had planned when he left for the countryside 20 years ago. It was much better. The following months brought unexpected news. The Legacy Foundation received a proposal for an international partnership. Organizations from other countries wanted to learn about the collective's model and adapt it for their own communities. Julian traveled to meetings in different countries, always accompanied by Lydia when possible. They visited small towns in Africa, rural communities in Asia, family farms in Europe. And in each place, they saw the same challenges they had faced in the United States. Good people working hard, but being exploited by unfair systems. On one of these trips to a small town in an African country, something happened that touched Julian deeply. They were meeting with a group of local farmers when an elderly woman stood up. "Mr. Julian," she said through a translator, "I heard your story, about how you pretended to be poor to find true love. And I want to tell you that your story is not about finding love, it is about finding yourself." Julian was surprised by the depth of the observation. "How so?" he asked. "You were rich but lost," the woman explained. "You had everything materially, but nothing spiritually. So you stripped away your possessions not to test others, but to discover who you really were without the masks of money. And you found a better man than you imagined you could be." The words resonated deeply with Julian. She was right. Yes, he had gone looking for true love, but in the process, he had found something even more important, his true identity. Not as a rich businessman, not as a poor man pretending to be something he wasn't, but as simply Julian, a man with flaws, with a capacity for good, with a desire to make a difference. "Thank you," he said to the woman, "for helping me see my own journey from a new perspective." The woman smiled. "We are all on journeys," she said. "The difference is you had the courage to begin yours, and now you are helping others begin theirs." When they returned to the United States, Julian was different, more at peace, more centered. Lydia noticed immediately. "What happened in Africa?" she asked. "You're different." "I had a revelation," Julian explained. "I realized I spent 20 years focusing on the wrong part of the story. I always thought the story was about proving that true love existed, about you forgiving me, about building the Harvest Collective. But the real story is about discovering who I truly am." "And who are you?" asked Lydia softly. "I am a man who makes mistakes but learns from them," replied Julian, "who has resources but uses them to help, who loves deeply and isn't afraid to show vulnerability, who believes in second chances because I was given one. I am simply Julian, and finally, after all these years, that is enough." Lydia smiled with tears in her eyes. "It was always enough," she said. "You just needed to believe it." That year, the Legacy Foundation completed 10 years of existence. It had directly helped more than 50,000 families and indirectly impacted hundreds of thousands of lives. Chloe's financial education program had empowered thousands of women. The network of the Harvest Collective continued to grow organically. To celebrate, they organized a big event in the town of Blue Ridge where it all began. They invited representatives from all branches of the collective, beneficiaries, partners, everyone who had been part of the journey. It was a 3-day celebration. On the first day, there were presentations about the Foundation's impact, stories of transformed lives, and plans for the future. On the second day, workshops and training sessions on new techniques and strategies. And on the third day, a big community party. During the party, Julian was called to the stage to give a speech. He went up, looked at the crowd of hundreds of people, and felt a deep emotion. "When I first came to this town over 20 years ago," he began, "I was looking for an answer to a question. Does true love still exist in a world where everything seems to be about dollars and self-interest?" He paused. "I found the answer. Not only did I find it, but I have lived the answer every day since then. Yes, true love exists. And not just romantic love, although I found that too in my incredible wife, Lydia." He pointed to Lydia in the audience, who blushed. "But I also found community love, the love of neighbors who become family, The love of strangers who help each other without expecting anything in return. The love of people who believe in second chances and are willing to give those chances. The audience was completely silent, absorbing every word. I made terrible mistakes, Julian continued. I lied, I manipulated, I hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt, and I could have remained stuck in those mistakes, letting them define me forever. But this community showed me another path. It showed me that mistakes are opportunities for growth, not permanent sentences. That is why this anniversary is not about the foundation, Julian declared. It is about all of you, every person who had the courage to trust a new system, every family that accepted help and then passed that help forward, every volunteer who donated their time, every person who believed a better world is possible. He paused to control his emotion. You transformed my life, and now, together, we are transforming thousands of other lives. This is not my legacy. It is our legacy, of all of us working together, believing together, building together. The ovation was deafening. People cried openly, hugged each other, celebrating not just the foundation, but the community that had become family. When Julian came down from the stage, Grace intercepted him. "Dad, I have something to show you," she said, taking his hand. She led him to a quieter corner of the celebration, where there was a canvas covered with a cloth. "I've been working on this for months," Grace explained, "as an anniversary gift for the foundation, but mostly as a gift for you and for Mom." She removed the cloth, revealing a hand-painted mural. It showed the evolution of the town over the years. On one end, simple houses and dry fields. In the middle, the town of Blue Ridge coming to life, the Harvest Collective being built, people working together. At the other end, a prosperous, vibrant community, full of color and life. But the detail that moved Julian the most were the central figures. Two people carrying a large sack together, clearly heavy but both smiling. He immediately recognized them as representations of himself and Lydia. "It's about carrying the weight together," explained Grace. "About how nothing is too heavy when you have the right person by your side." Julian couldn't hold back the tears. He hugged his daughter tightly. "It's perfect," he murmured. "Absolutely perfect." Lydia joined them, and the three stood there looking at the mural, each lost in their own reflections about the journey they had shared. That night, long after most guests had left, Julian, Lydia, and Grace walked to the top of a small hill overlooking the entire town. The lights from the houses shone below, and the distant sound of laughter and conversation still echoed. "You know what I realized today?" Grace said suddenly. "What, dear?" asked Lydia. "That your story isn't unusual," said Grace. "I mean, the details are unique. But the essence? People making mistakes, being forgiven, changing, growing? That happens every day, in every family here." She pointed to the houses below. "That's where Mr. George lives, who used to drink too much and almost lost his family. But he changed and now has 10 years of sobriety. That's Mrs. Eleanor's house, who was robbed by her own son, but forgave him and helped him rehabilitate. And over there live the Thompsons, who almost got divorced, but chose to fight for their marriage and are now more in love than ever." "You're right," said Julian, understanding. "Our story isn't special because it's unique. It's special because it's universal. We all make mistakes, we all need forgiveness, we all have the capacity to change." "Exactly," agreed Grace, "and that's why the Legacy Foundation works so well, because it's not based on judgment or perfection, it's based on understanding and second chances." They stayed there a while longer, just enjoying the view and each other's company. Then they began to walk down the hill, back home. On the way, they passed through the central square where Julian had made his public confession 20 years earlier. The place now had a small, well-kept garden and comfortable benches. It was a place where people gathered, talked, made plans. "Do you remember that day?" asked Lydia, stopping in the square. "How could I forget?" replied Julian. "It was the most frightening and liberating day of my life. Getting up on that platform and telling the whole truth, knowing you were in the crowd, not knowing if you would forgive me or reject me forever." "I was frightened too," admitted Lydia, "because part of me wanted to reject you, to protect my heart. But another part, the part that had spent months getting to know the real you, knew I had to give you a chance. "Best decision I ever made," said Julian. "It was hard to rebuild trust, it took time, but every day of effort was worth it." "And look where we are now," said Lydia, pointing around. "This square, this town, this community, all of it was born from that moment of honesty and forgiveness." Grace watched her parents with admiration. She had grown up hearing fragments of this story, but now, standing there in the exact place where it happened, she fully understood the weight of the moment. "I want to find that," she said softly. "Find what?" asked Lydia. "What you have," explained Grace. "Not necessarily in the same way, with the same challenges, but I want to find someone I can build something real with. Someone who accepts me with all my flaws, just as you accept each other's flaws." "You will find it," Julian assured her. "Because it was created to value the right things. You won't settle for superficiality or self-interest. You'll seek substance, character, values. And when you find it," added Lydia, "you'll work hard to keep it, because real relationships require effort. It's not always easy, it's not always pretty, but it's always worthwhile." They continued walking and soon arrived home. The property had changed a lot over the years. It was still functional, there were still crops and animals, but now it also had a small training center where they taught sustainable farming techniques to other producers. As they prepared for bed, Julian reflected on how much his life had changed. He thought of the man he was 20 years ago, rich in dollars but poor in spirit, surrounded by people but deeply lonely, successful in business but failing at life. And now? He still had money, but that was secondary. What he had that was truly valuable couldn't be measured in monetary terms. He had a wife who loved him and challenged him to be better. He had a daughter who embodied the best values he and Lydia could teach. He had a community that accepted him completely. He had work that made a real difference in the lives of thousands of people. "What are you thinking about?" asked Lydia, noticing his silence. "About gratitude," replied Julian. "About how absurdly lucky I am. About how everything could have been so different if you had sent me away that first day, or if you hadn't forgiven me afterward." "The universe has strange plans for us," said Lydia philosophically. "Who would have thought my greatest blessing would come disguised as a lying worker with hands full of blisters?" Julian laughed. "And who would have thought my redemption would come from a suspicious widow who made me carry grain sacks until I almost passed out?" They laughed together, and then Julian grew serious. "Lydia, I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I've never said before." "What?" she asked, slightly worried. "Thank you," Julian said simply, "for everything. For giving me work when I needed it, for being patient with my lies, for forgiving me when you found out, for giving me grace, for building this life with me, for loving me when I wasn't very lovable, for everything." Lydia had tears in her eyes. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "I did it all because I wanted to, because I love you." "I know," said Julian. "But still, thank you. Because you could have chosen the easier path so many times. You could have rejected me. You could have accepted Barrett's proposal. You could have held on to resentment. But you did none of that. You chose the hard path, the path of compassion and forgiveness. And that made all the difference. They embraced, and in that hug was everything that didn't need to be said. All the love, all the forgiveness, all the gratitude accumulated over 20 years. The next morning, Julian woke with a deep certainty. Today would be a special day. Not because he had anything planned, but because he finally fully understood his journey. He got up early and walked to the hill from where they could see the whole town of Blue Ridge. The sun was rising, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. The houses were beginning to wake, smoke rising from chimneys, people heading out to start their days. 25 years since he arrived there with lies and despair. And look at what he had built. Not just for himself, but for hundreds, thousands of people. Lydia came to join him on the hill, bringing 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I knew you'd be here," she said, handing him a cup. "How?" asked Julian. Because it's where you always come when you need to think, replied Lydia. And today is a day for reflection, 25 years. 25. They stayed silent for a while, just watching the town wake up. If you could go back, Julian finally said, and do it all over again, knowing exactly what would happen, would you do anything differently? Lydia thought carefully before answering. I'd like to say yes, she said, that I would change the part with the lies, that I would make everything perfect from the start. But the truth is, no, because the journey, with all its imperfections, brought us exactly where we needed to be. I think the same, agreed Julian. The lies were wrong. The pain I caused was real, but the transformation that resulted, both in me and in so many other people, wouldn't have happened without that specific journey. That doesn't excuse the lies, said Lydia firmly. No, agreed Julian. It never excuses, but it contextualizes. It shows that even from our worst mistakes, something transformative can arise if we're willing to do the hard work of real change. Grace joined them on the hill, still in her pajamas but already awake. I knew I'd find you two here, she said, the family philosophers. Come here, said Lydia, opening her arms. Grace settled between her parents, and the three of them stood there, watching the world awaken. You know what I've noticed, said Grace. You always talk about your journey, about mistakes and forgiveness, but you never stop to acknowledge what you've actually accomplished. What have we accomplished? Asked Julian, curious. You changed the world, said Grace simply, not in some grand or dramatic way, but one person at a time, one family at a time, one town at a time. Thousands of lives are different because you chose to work together, to forgive, to build something bigger than yourselves. Julian felt emotion rising. We didn't do it alone, he said. We had help from hundreds of people. Of course, agreed Grace, but you started it. You took the first step. And now that wave of kindness you created keeps spreading, far beyond what you can control or even see. She pointed to the town of Blue Ridge below. In every one of those houses there are stories of transformation, people who were helped, who now help others, and it all started because a dishonest man had the courage to seek change, and a kind woman had the courage to forgive. It's beautiful when you think of it that way. Lydia had tears streaming down her face. When did you grow up so much? She asked, hugging her daughter. I had good teachers, Grace replied simply. They walked down the hill together, back home. It was Sunday, the day the family gathered for lunch, and today would be special, because besides Grace, they would have other guests. Connor had traveled from New York City, bringing his wife and their 2 children. Chloe, the one who worked with the Legacy Foundation, would come with her husband. The young couple, Chloe and Austin, would come with their 3 children, Mrs. Beatrice, Mr. Arthur, Billy, Barrett, all their close friends. It would be a quiet celebration, not of a specific anniversary, not of a particular achievement, but of life itself, of the shared journey, of the love that bound them all together. While Lydia and Grace prepared lunch, Julian went out to check the property. He walked through the fields he had worked, the fences he had repaired, the places that held so many memories, and in every corner he saw not just what it was, but what it meant. That fence wasn't just wood and wire. It was the place where his hands had first formed calluses. That field wasn't just dirt and plants. It was where he had learned the value of hard work. That barn wasn't just a structure. It was where he had found purpose. When he returned home, the guests were already arriving. Hugs, laughter, children running, the house filled with life and joy. During lunch there was a moment when everyone fell silent, not an uncomfortable silence, but a silence of contentment, of people who know each other well, who love each other, who don't need to fill every second with words. It was Mr. Arthur who broke the silence. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, raising his glass of juice. Not to any specific occasion, but to life, to the journey we all share, to the mistakes we've made and the lessons we've learned, to the forgiveness we've given and received, to the community we've built together. Everyone raised their glasses. And most of all, continued Mr. Arthur, looking at Julian and Lydia, to these 2, who showed us it's never too late to change, that true love exists, that second chances are worth it, and that when we work together, we can achieve things we never could alone. "Cheers!" everyone shouted, toasting. After lunch, while some helped clean up and others played with the children, Julian found himself alone on the porch for a moment. Connor joined him. "What are you thinking about, old friend?" asked Connor. "About how strange life is," replied Julian. "All those years ago, when I was planning that charade of pretending to be poor, I never imagined it would lead to this life, these people, this purpose." "And if you could go back and tell the Julian of 25 years ago one thing," asked Connor, "what would you say?" Julian thought for a long moment. "I'd say the answer you're looking for isn't in testing other people," replied Julian. "It's in testing yourself, in discovering who you really are when you take off all the masks, and that when you discover it, you'll find something far better than you expected." Connor smiled. "You've always been my best friend," he said. "But the man you've become, I'm even prouder to call you my friend." "I can't take the credit," said Julian. "It's hers." He pointed inside the house where Lydia was laughing at something Mrs. Beatrice had said. "She's the one who transformed me. She's the one who showed me the way." "No," Connor gently disagreed. "She gave you the opportunity. But you did the hard work. You chose to change. You chose to grow. That was all you." Julian reflected on that. Perhaps Connor was right. Lydia had opened the door, but he had chosen to walk through it. She had offered forgiveness, but he had chosen to accept it and work to deserve it. She had believed in him, but he had chosen to be worthy of that trust. "Perhaps," Julian finally said, "perhaps we transformed each other. She taught me about forgiveness and community. I taught her it's possible to trust again after loss. Together, we became better versions of ourselves." "That's what a good marriage is about," said Connor. "Mutual transformation. Growing together." That night, after all the guests had left, after Grace had gone to sleep, Julian and Lydia were on their porch. It was their sacred ritual, their moment of connection at the end of each day. But tonight was different. There was something in the air, a sense of closure, not of an ending, but of a completed cycle. 25 years, Lydia said softly. A quarter of a century. "It feels like both an eternity and an instant," replied Julian. "Do you have any regrets?" asked Lydia. "About the lies always," said Julian. "But about the journey as a whole? No, because it brought me you, Grace, this life, this purpose." "I don't have regrets either," said Lydia. "Even knowing all the pain I went through, all the tears I cried, I would choose it all again, because what we have now is worth every difficult moment." They fell silent, just holding hands, watching the stars. "You know what I thought today?" Julian said suddenly. "What?" "That I've finally completed the journey," explained Julian. "When I arrived here, I was trying to prove something. I was looking for answers. I was looking for validation. And today, 25 years later, I'm not searching for anything anymore. I found everything." "Everything?" asked Lydia with a smile. "Everything that matters," corrected Julian. "I found true love. I found purpose. I found community. I found myself. I found peace." Lydia kissed his hand. "And I found my partner," she said. "Someone who carries the weight with me. Someone who challenges me to be better. Someone who chooses every single day to work by my side to build something good." They embraced, and in that embrace was everything. All the past, all the present, all the future. "Thank you," murmured Julian, "for everything." "Thank you," replied Lydia, "for having the courage to change, for giving me grace, for building this life with me." And there on that porch under the stars, two imperfect human beings who had chosen to love and forgive, who had chosen to work hard and build something real, who had chosen to be better than they were, found perfect peace. Because in the end, that was the true lesson. Not that true love exists only when we find it, but that true love is something we build every day through choices. Choice of honesty, choice of vulnerability, choice of forgiveness, choice of hard work, choice of commitment. Julian had pretended to be poor to get a faithful wife, but what really happened was much deeper. He stripped away all the false identities to find his true self, and in the process, he found not just a wife but a partner, not just love but transformation, not just happiness but purpose. And Lydia, she hadn't just gained a husband. She had gained someone who truly saw her, who fully valued her, who chose every day to be by her side. She had gained an extended family through the Legacy Foundation. She had gained the knowledge that her capacity to forgive had changed not just one life, but thousands. And Grace, she was the living proof that when two people choose to truly love, when they choose to work together, when they choose values over convenience, they create something that lasts, a legacy not of dollars, but of character, not of possessions, but of principles. That night, Julian slept with deep peace. Peace that comes not from having everything perfect, but from knowing you did the best you could with what you had. Peace that comes not from never having made a mistake, but from having learned from the mistakes. Peace that comes not from having all the answers, but from having found the right questions. And in the morning, when the sun rose over that town of Blue Ridge that had become their home, when Lydia woke by his side and Grace began her day, when the community awoke to another day of work and life, Julian knew with absolute certainty he had found what he was looking for, and it was more beautiful, deeper, more meaningful than he ever imagined possible. True love existed, and he was living inside it, every day, in every honest choice, every act of kindness, every moment of real connection with the people he loved, and the community that had welcomed him. This was his life, and it was absolutely perfect in its imperfection, absolutely enough in its simplicity, absolutely everything he needed. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought of this journey of transformation and forgiveness. Do you believe Julian deserved the second chance that Lydia gave him? Have you experienced anything similar in your own life? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you for your company until now, and don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.